Hi, my name is Nancy Love. I'm talking to you on behalf of the Planet Peace Project. This right here is a pin I've worn every day since my cats and I were separated in 2019. It was already something I planned to do, just a brief, sort of cute story from my childhood. Back in the spring. I started a series live on Facebook called Things That I Learned When Young That Have Served Me well all my life, or things that I learned in school that still serve me well. Now, I'll repost a few of those today if I can remember to do that. I'm kind of busy getting my cats back. Incidentally, um, not incidentally, I am really upset today because Ruth Bader Ginsburg has departed from the planet. I didn't get on to the internet until the afternoon, and when I found out she's left us, I just started sobbing. I'm very sad, and she's one of the most grateful. She did so much good in her. Um, I did see a video in which she was talking about people becoming attorneys. At the bar, you become an attorney. You're going to have skills that will allow you to help a lot of people, and realize that um, it's not about money. It's not about fame. It's not about glory. It's about helping people. Being an attorney, you're supposed to be primarily motivated to help others. And I thought, wow, that is so insightful, right there alone. That's pretty darn brilliant. I just loved her so much. And although I already planned on telling this story about the smart girl, because she passed yesterday, I'm dedicating it to her. She graduated, I think, in 1954 at the very top of her university. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the smart girl. When I was growing up, I was told early on that I had one of the highest IQs ever recorded in the history of history. I was told that when I was 5, and that's quite a mouthful. That's quite a lot to hear for a kid. So you as a child, you want to be normal, you want to fit in, you want to be a regular kid, and you don't, or at least in my case, you don't really want to be told that you're way over here and everybody else is here, and you're like some kind of weird, different mutant thing over there by yourself. You want to be a normal kid. And I was certainly no exception. Maybe I'm smart enough to have wanted to be a normal kid. But uh, I was known in first and second and part of third grade for having the top scores. And teachers did something then that I do not agree with at all. Several of my teachers would hand out papers once we submitted them, and test scores and so forth. They would hand back test papers so that we could have them and take them home and so forth in order of the grades. So the person who had the top grade would get theirs first so that everyone knew who scored highest, and then the second, the third, and the fourth. And they would actually save the person or the people with the bottom scores, and those kids would get theirs last. I think that's abominable. That is unconscionable. It's none of anybody's business who had the worst or best score, and that set up children for all kinds of competition, and scored the lowest were the coolest, and they were the sweetest, and they had high emotional quotient, and they had a lot of things going for them other than making good grades. And some of the smartest kids, some of the kids who got their papers first and had the best scores on tests, weren't necessarily sophisticated or kind or comfortable. They were often sort of misfits. And, there's no relationship between worth and grades. And I hope that speaks to some parents who are browbeating their kids for making uh, less than perfect scores, because your kids may grow up to be president or millionaires or the person who cures most kinds of cancer, and it doesn't matter that they're straight A's or not. In fact, when I was in junior high school, one time I brought my math scores home, and my mother got really upset, and she called in my father, who was this huge man who almost never said anything until he did. And then you probably didn't want to hear it. You know, he could be very loquacious about things like engineering, electrical devices and inventions. He was a brilliant man, but he didn't interact much with the offspring. And when he did, it was probably only because of some disciplinary action. So my huge father comes in and he said, "Your mother is upset, and I'm upset with these math scores." I said, "Why? What's the issue?" And he said, "You made a 98. If you start making grades like this, you're slipping. Who knows where you'll end up?" I had made a 98. They were used to hundreds and 99s. That sucked. That sucked bad. And that sort of thing is truly absurd. So back to third grade. By the time I was midway through third grade, I and my cohorts were accustomed to me getting my paper first, right? Um, but I was also smart enough to have worked my way into the popular crowd. I was funny. I had this huge sense of humor. I was deeply compassionate. And my third grade teacher said something so cool. She called me up to her desk one time, and she said that out of all the people she'd ever known, adults, professors, family, friends, out of all the thousands of people she'd ever known, and she was in her 60s when she said this, that a 9-year-old child, was the single most compassionate, loving, nurturing person she had 100 or an A on a test. I'm no longer the most compassionate, loving, nurturing person that anybody ever met. Now I call myself a curmudgeon and a misanthrope. But those skills are hard won. Now, I was not an unpopular smart girl. I was a popular smart girl. But I was accustomed to being at the top of the class. And that was only obvious because of the way they handed out papers, right? Well, a new girl came, a girl whose parents were in the military, and she had, I think, been born or grown up in Germany. And she was very competitive, and she was very severe, and she almost never smiled, and she was not popular. She was physically, and her parents were even more competitive than mine were. They really, really pushed her to make not only straight A's but straight hundreds. And I'll always remember she got there and everybody was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And we took a test and the teacher was handing them out, and she said, "Well, guess who's got the top score?" And people giggled because they figured I was about to get handed my test, right? They handed it to the new girl. The teacher handed new girl, and that for the first time in my life, for 9 whole years, I had been at the top of the class, and all of a sudden I wasn't. So for the first time in my life, I knew what it would be like. Kind of laughed, and everybody was real confused, like, "Whoa!" And the teacher gave me my score, my test paper second, and I smiled, and I thought, how do I work this? Because I had already realized that jealousy is one of the single most uncomfortable things you can experience. I had already heard things like bitterness consumes the vessel that contains it, and that And we find that that's even true ways of not being jealous and not being envious and being free of all that, because jealousy is a terrible form of bitterness, right? So I thought about it and I talked to a few people about it. And the next day, I decided to befriend her. I asked her to come home and enjoy my backyard and some fresh baked cookies and play with me and my best friend. And my best friend was a B student. She was the funniest person. She had a tremendous sense of humor. It was kind of like growing up with Gilda Radner or something. And she was just real easygoing. And my best friend was not by any means at the top of the class, but she wasn't anywhere near the bottom of the pile either. So my best friend Elaine and the new girl Sharon and I played in my backyard. And Sharon cried when she left. And she said she had just had more fun than she'd ever had in her life. And she said, "Thank you for not hating me for being smart." I said, "Thank you for not hating me for being smart." And I said, "Let's not compete with each other. Let's help each other." And Elena was over here going, "And you all can both help me make better grades." So we did. We took Elaine under our wing. But I want you to know that the way to deal with the smart girl is to not envy her, befriend her, and or become her. You don't have to sit apart and envy or be jealous from anyone ever. You can appropriate whatever skills they have. Uh, sometimes you can sometimes appropriate other aspects of that person's being. But in another video that I made last spring that turns out to have been really helpful to people, I talked about when I was earlier that same year when I was 8 years old. I had envied a high school student who was very pretty and charming and funny and popular. And instead of just sitting around with bitterness consuming the vessel that contained it, I decided to work through my jealousy intellectually. And I made a list of all the things she had that I wanted. And I figured out which of those I could have myself. Be more outgoing, be more extroverted, be more funny instead of so severe and serious, wear prettier clothes instead of just whatever. And I actually found it a tremendously helpful exercise. I ended up befriending the high school student, even though I was only 8 years old. And when I made that video in the spring, several people said, "That was so helpful. I made a list." And several people said, "You were the person I envied, Nancy." Well, I've been through hell in a handbasket. I've had severe injuries in the last several years. I can't even stand up or walk anymore. I've had my 5 cats basically stolen, and now I'm embroiled in a legal battle to get them back or even to find them. I've had what I care about and love most on this world taken from me. And it's not being able to stand up or walk, it's my 5 cats. Intellect and my ability to be usually relatively cool in a crisis. And now this is okay, it's leaking out enough. And they actually said that I had emotional and intellectual skills that they were jealous of until they realized that jealousy wasn't helping them be my friend or vice versa. So think on these things because my approach to all of a sudden not being the smartest kid in the class for a day was not to hate the girl, was not to distance myself from the girl, was not to, try to make her unpopular. I embraced her. I put my arm right around her and I said, "Whoever you are, I'm taking care of you." I took her under my wing. And since I was well liked and a leader, a social leader to some extent, People followed my lead, and instead of being castigated and seen as this sour, dour, severe Germanic girl, she became popular as well. She became very well liked, and there were several times over the course of our uh, interaction where she would literally cry on me and said that her friendship with me was extremely meaningful because it brought her so many other friends and so much self respect and so much comfort and ease that she hadn't had before because her parents were extremely, almost like viciously competitive, Germanic Ubermensch and Uberfrau, that kind of thing. As far as embracing intellectuals or people with cognitive skills that you admire, I'll say a couple more things. I read a rule of thumb in business years ago, decades ago, that said you can tell the intelligent entrepreneur. They're the ones that hire people that they think might be smarter than they are. And you think, well, what's up with that? Why would anybody want to, if you're the owner of the business, why would you want people around who are smarter than you are? You'd want to be the boss, right? No, actually, you would want to learn from them. You want someone who's good at accounting if you're not. You want many entrepreneurs are just gestalt thinkers. They're executive level skill people. And a lot of us have significant greater issues performing little perfunctory duties that are large if they don't get done. Administrative skills, secretarial type of skills are different from gestalt entrepreneurial skills. And so to have someone who's good at those methodical things, the administrative and secretarial skills, is very important to a gestalt thinker because sometimes the secretary or the gatekeeper is the one who keeps the company running. The other thing is, I knew a guy, or actually, I didn't know him, but I heard about him. There's a producer in Hollywood who, for a time, was so smart that he was actually um, having lunch with one genius a week. So it was his Genius a Week program, and he was interviewed somewhere, and he said that he was learning so much uh, by having lunch, just spending a couple hours once a week with someone who was widely considered genius in whatever field. These fields uh, were diverse and broadly ranging. But I thought that is one of the smartest things I have ever heard about in my life. To try to meet with a genius a week and poke their brains for a couple hours and see what you can get out of that brain. That is truly intelligent. Well, enough about this. So embrace that smart girl because if you do, you might actually become one.